Yep.
Oh,
I
yeah.
saw a goalie score once on a goal kick. It was a shorter field because these were younger kids. Kid boomed it. It was the perfect arc, so it was coming down directly in the sun.
Oh.
And it was so far in the other field. The other goalie came running out to get it and went, wait, I lost it. Went over his head, bounced once, and went right in the goal. Welcome to the Intrazone, a show about the Microsoft 365 Intelligent Intranet. I'm Chris McNulty, here with my Partner Edition co-host, Mark Cashman.
Thank you, Chris. I'm excited to be here for this edition of the Intrazone.
And we're on a quest today to learn more about Quest. At Microsoft, our mission is to empower individuals and organizations to achieve more, and we can't do it alone. That's why on the Intrazone Partner Edition, we're sitting down each month with a partner to talk about how they are helping our customers achieve more with their solutions.
On this next episode of our Microsoft Partner Series of the Intrazone, we're talking with our partner Quest and a special conversation with their customer, NHS Arden and Greater East Midlands Commissioning Support Unit, or CSU.
Well, Mark, as you may know, I have never worked for the National Health Service.
Never?
Nope.
You've been, as many times as you've told me, over to the UK. I would have thought that maybe you were working for NHS for many times you were going over there.
No comment. But it is a matter of public record that I did used to work at Quest. I want to catch up. I have not been back at that organization in years. I'm really looking forward to hearing about what's new and also what's old. Going back 10 plus years ago when I was there were some great Quest traditions, especially around software quality. And I'm really happy to see as they've come together and brought a whole new round of SharePoint and Office 365 solutions into the market. Really love catching up to see where they're headed.
If you were to think back when you were with them, however many years ago, and with certainly what we're going to talk about today with what they do today, what is the most significant change?
The biggest change is cloud. When I was there, I was general manager and CTO in Quest and then the transition to Dell software. And Office 365 existed. We had some migration tools for it. But those days, the challenges that we had were how quickly can we pivot and adapt to the cloud since most of our customers are still on premises. That's completely flipped for Microsoft and I think completely flipped for Quest. That they're definitely a cloud-led organization at this point.
So with Quest having been on that journey and bringing now this technology to NHS through the customer that we will talk with today, Arden and Gem, I think people will hear of how the National Health Service system, through this story of Arden and Gem, who is a subsidiary of NHS, with their health and care systems that are focused on prevention and healthcare in the UK, it'll be really interesting to hear how they're leveraging what Quest is today and how that helps them moving forward.
I agree, and I'm really looking forward to learning more. So let's get started with this month's edition of the Intrazone Partner Edition.
So let's turn to talk with our partner from Quest, Colin Truran. Colin, thank you for joining us today, and maybe you can start off by saying a little bit about who you are and how you got into this crazy tech world.
I got into this crazy tech world at the age of 9, believe it or not. So I started programming when I was 9 years old through curiosity.
What language were you working in then?
Assembly.
Wow.
There was nothing else to do. I lived in a small town. There was literally nothing else to do, which was great for my education, not for my personal life. In fact, just the other day, one of our lead professional service delivery guys told me to get a life when I was trying to explain to him what I was doing with a Raspberry Pi and hacking Wi-Fi connection. So, I started deep down and messy, went all the way through my life being fascinated by data, loved technology, terrible at English, so it seemed a good idea to carry on with technology. And thankfully, the greatest thing about technology is it's correcting my English in a far more proficient way than I could ever do.
Very nice. I'm curious, is there a Raspberry Pi node of the Quest site? Is there anything that you're building as unique solutions that you discovered in your garage with the Raspberry Pi?
Not yet. Everything that I've discovered in my garage is staying there right now. I think we've got enough to do. We have so many different solutions at Quest. I think if I broached the subject of moving into that direction, I would probably get, thrown out of the office for sure.
Well, let's talk about how you got thrown into the office in the first place. How did you get started with Quest?
Yeah, so I was helping out. I worked for a small consultancy company here in the UK, and I was helping a company called Aftermail, actually, it was email archiving solution. It developed over in I forget where, New Zealand. That's where they were. They're over in New Zealand. I should remember because I fell off a Segway in the office in New Zealand. Another story. They came over from New Zealand. They were trying to break into the UK and European market, and I was working for them. And Quest acquired this company, and I got asked to join as part of that. And so I came along, had a look, and realized, oh my gosh, I'm going to be a kid in a candy shop here. And thought, yes, I'd love to join. So that's how I ended up at Quest.
And how long ago was that?
14 years ago.
You've been through Quest before and now, which we'll come to in a little bit. What is your role right now?
So I'm principal strategist at the moment. And it's the greatest job in the world, really is. When I try to explain people, actually, one of the questions I get asked a lot is, how do I do that job? That sounds like a great job to me, because I get to think of problems that don't exist. I think of better ways of putting things together, because we have about 130 active solutions out there. So trying to find ways of doing things better, working with our customers and our other partners, and trying to do things better and be creative again.
So your role as strategist obviously has a breadth of who you talk with internally, externally. To start to dive in a little bit more about Quest, you are a global provider to about 130,000 companies across 100 countries. It includes obviously very large, medium, and small customers, but certainly 95% of the Fortune 500 and 90% of the Global 1000. So you're doing big projects, big thinking. Beyond you as an individual, what is Quest offering to these customers that you could, roll up as a broad set of solutions?
In principle, what we try to focus on is move, manage, and secure. Those are sort of our mantras of what we're offering. And we do it across many platforms from many different software solutions to many different destinations. But what we do is we make it much, much easier and safer to get there. Anyone could probably try and do it themselves, but the risks involved are very, very large. And then trying to adopt those new technologies and make the most of them, people use about 10% of what they've invested in. And most of that's because they can't access that investment. It takes too long, or it's too hidden within the environment. And we make sure that the right functionality is presented to the clients, to the end users, to make sure they've got an advantage over their competitors, I guess.
One thing I really like about Quest is if you think about kind of as Mark and I come from the SharePoint universe and kind of the explosion of SharePoint 10 years ago, and it was everywhere, and then it seemed to subside for a while. And in the last few years, I do think we've really accelerated what we've been doing with the rise of cloud and everything we've done with modern. And Quest has sort of been on a similar journey. A lot of folks may remember Quest back from the old days of the original SharePoint conference, and then something happened along the way, and we didn't hear as much about Quest for a while. What's it like being back in the new Quest?
Well, it's fantastic. Actually, I'm not just saying that. It is really great. And being able to do so much with SharePoint now, because it is a foundational technology. Organizations have moved there as early adopters when it became first released on premise. And then now they're adopting it and making more of it within the cloud. It is a game-changing technology for organizations because it gives them the chance to actually really start using that normally locked away dysfunctional data that's hidden from daily use. So it allows us to really, really make a difference to organizations, to help them improve what they're doing. One of the key areas of my roles, especially when I'm advising organizations, is I specialize in regulatory compliance and in particular data privacy. And with that also coming things like data analytics and everything else, because you have to understand what you've got. And one of the stumbling blocks that organizations are facing is taking control of that disorganized, uncategorized data. And a great way of doing that, SharePoint.
So full disclosure for our audience, back in the days before I was at Microsoft, I was general manager and CTO back at Quest Software, and then as we got rolled up into Dell. And one of the things that I've really observed is as Quest has been reformed from what was at Dell for a while, as I was observing a lot of the acquisitions that Quest was making in this space and the technologies they were integrating, I've really been excited because Quest has always had a fantastic quality-driven culture. And I know back in the day and now, investing heavily in things like QA and support and documentation. And even if it means that the solutions don't always roll out as fast as possible, everything that's built is at such a high level of quality. I think it really has provided our mutual customers a chance to benefit from that Quest experience moving forward.
Obviously, I couldn't have put that better myself. One of the key areas I would like to pull out as well is that because of when we left Dell, we were able to really consider the market and what was needed in it. And we decided, obviously, we needed to create a SaaS platform that allows organizations to do what they need to do. But also, we can use all of that hidden intellectual property and all the experts that we've accumulated over the years and build the right way of doing things. Now, a lot of people talk about DevOps, but what they missed when they first considered doing that was the security aspect of DevOps. And we consider security fundamental to everything we do because we're controlling so many parts of their organization. So we ensure that things like DevOps and security are working together. It's part of the build program.
And from what I understand, doing some of the research just about Quest is as you take on some of that management and security, another mantra that I came across was that as you work with customers, you want to help them spend less time on IT and management and more focus on the business innovation. With that in mind, beyond the security and management, what is the business innovation that you're seeing that your customers need? And what Chris and I are always really interested in to share with our audience is what are people doing? What are they actually using? What do you see out there?
They've adopted Azure and Office 365, and they really want to make the most of it. And they got their feet wet with the classic Exchange Online and so on. But what they really want to do now is start hooking everything up together. And we've seen, as you're aware, teams completely transform how they're thinking about the service they're offering to the rest of their organization. So we're seeing a lot of work within teams, making sure that it's managed correctly, it's secured, it's recoverable. And that's granting them the ability then to go out and commit more heavily into that arena. So yeah, a key area that we're seeing a lot of is teams work. But as well, it's I think Gartner pointed out 63% of organizations will undergo a merger or an acquisition or a divestiture in the coming 12 months. That's an awful lot of work. And some are actually doing it in parallel. So they're not just doing one acquisition or one merger at a time. So they need that flexibility to be able to perform those tasks without impacting the rest of their business. I guess that's where we come in.
Well, Colin, really thanks for sharing with our audience a little bit of where Quest is. And another side note, this is the Inside Baseball, gratuitous sports reference.
Always.
The one thing Quest does not do anymore is fish tank maintenance. Because Quest offices, back in the days when Vinnie Smith was CEO, especially the headquarters in Aliso Viejo, California, and Columbus, Ohio, always had these massive fish tanks in the lobby. The one in California was nearly 8 feet high, and we used to film customer segments in front of it. And when I heard that Quest was being reformed, I was really looking forward to visiting the offices for the fish tanks, and they're just not doing that.
I really like the angler that you took on that one, Chris.
Let's turn, now that we've mentioned water, let's head back across the pond again, see what I did, and introduce Chris Reynolds from NHS Arden and GEM Commissioning Support. Chris, welcome to the IntraZone.
Oh, thank you very much for inviting me.
So, Chris, before we dive in, we heard a lot about Quest and Colin, and we want to hear about you and then, of course, explain your role and really then what it is that Arden and Gem offer in the UK and beyond.
Okay, so starting many years ago, I started on an electronics degree. However, I found out I was absolutely no good at electronics, but I was a lot better at computers. So I joined the Air Force, was an engineering officer before coming out, and then worked doing sort of bit of everything in IT. I was doing follow the sun help desk support from China to South Carolina with a precision engineering company, then moved into the education sector, looking at legacy systems, bringing them through to HP blades, and then into the healthcare. And I started off with server and systems team manager for Oxford Health before moving to Arden CSU, which was then later became Arden Gem CSU. So my role originally was knowledge management, so looking at data structuring, how we retrieved information and making sure people had the right information at the right time. Now, my role is it's a lot of words put together, so it's head of system development and application services. So very much if it isn't a server, if it isn't a network, it's my problem or under my remit. And I heavily use the Office 365 stack. It's a tool that I absolutely believe in. So sorry there.
So could you talk a little bit, the NHS, the National Health Service, for folks who may not be familiar with it outside of the UK, they may dimly remember it, or not at all, as the subject of the opening of the 2012 London Olympics, when people rolled out hospital beds and were dancing around to celebrate national health. What is NHS Arden?
Well, I'm going to start with the NHS because I know that's where you went, Trevor, originally. The NHS looks like one organisation. It's actually hundreds of smaller organisations working together to give healthcare free at the point of delivery. And lots of it is how they all work together and how they interact. So a commissioning support unit provides the back office functions, things like business intelligence, IT, procurement, HR, to a load of care commissioning groups, which are groups of doctors.
So I would imagine many of the challenges that Colin was talking about with traditional commercial organizations dealing with mergers and acquisitions and integrations, you face many of those same challenges when you look across the entire network with the complexity of that organization.
Oh, definitely. And there are so many mergers going on at the moment. We've got CCGs, these care commissioning groups, reforming. I think I've got 23 different mergers going on at the moment with organisations that are evolving to primary care networks. So loads of different acronyms. We love our acronyms in the NHS. So yes.
To just drill in a little bit more about what you do and I think what it is that your company offers, there was the phrase population health management. If you saw that as a solution or an area of focus, help us understand what it is, and then that part that your team plays in helping that move forward.
So the population health management is looking at the flow on the system, so where people are going, how often they're being readmitted, looking at the risk stratification, so looking at the likelihood of somebody going to be going through the different care networks. It's a massive piece, and it's an area that I only work on the side of, but we're actually working with several other partners in the Azure space using data warehousing, and we're trying to build this through, and we provide that nationally for the UK. So it's a really big area. Unfortunately, I can't dig deeply into that. My side of things is very much more the 365 and getting the productivity of the different organizations up so they can actually collaborate with information.
My sense, even if it's not an area that you focus on, a lot of what I've heard you say already, especially when you start to bring in the tools like Office 365, is just the orchestration between people, process, and most likely lots of different services or systems. How do you approach that? And then I think that's where we'll lead into the work that you've been doing with Quest.
You nearly took the words right out of my mouth. We always talk about people, process, and technology. The technology is the easiest, cheapest bit, which is often quite shocking because lots of organizations we sort of start talking to, they go, oh, it's going to cost me this much for the software. And you go, okay, your business change is going to cost you more. Look at how you're driving things forward. So we do a lot of work to try and find the underlying drivers, why they're trying to do something. Are they trying to improve efficiency, reduce cost, improve service levels, and try and work that out so we find the right tool at the right time. Because lots of it is 365 is brilliant, but do they need all of it? Do they need to focus on one area?
So then, Chris, what did you need from Colin and team? Why did you bring in Quest, and what role do they play in how you not just use Office 365, but really pit it as the foundation to what you do day to day?
Being honest, when I went to Quest, I was in a bit of a horrible place. I was running very light on resource, and I had a lot of data to move. We had some legacy SharePoint servers. I would say Microsoft would disown us. They were that old. They really were horrendous, and we were trying to move data across. And, of course, everything to the business was critical. We had to keep all the versions, and it was an absolute nightmare. And I attempted valiantly to try and do it manually with the resource and manpower I had and failed dismally. So we went, right, we need a tool, repeatable every time. And actually, when we went to Quest, we talked to them, they heard us, and they said, look, try this. Does this work for you? And it did. And what it's actually meant is over the last couple of years, I've been able to focus on different things, the extra value add, because the standard process is taken out of the way. I don't need to worry about it.
I'd love to get your perspective. When you think about the standard processes being out of the way, what is your strategy? What things are you now freed up to think about in the role of technology championing public health?
Well, so for me, I can think about what's the next big thing? Where are we going to go now? I mean, Colin mentioned Teams. We absolutely love Teams. It's adding the extra features in. So we're looking at how we drive data-driven insights and giving the information at the right time. So we're using Power BI dedicated nodes. We're looking at the machine learning, leveraging the information that's already there and bringing it together and reflecting it. And it's that reflection. Because lots of the time, the people have the data, they just don't realize what it says. And this allows them to see it.
It's interesting you mentioned that. We've talked to a number of different organizations in healthcare, and like Teams is one of those things that's becoming more and more pervasive. How do I use those Teams clients, whether they're mobile or more traditional, to be able to pull information, whether it's coming from SharePoint or other software, or the data that you already have, to be able to bring all those things together in that single pane of glass so a provider can make the right decisions on the go?
It's definitely a big thing for us. And nationally, we're trying to get more access to the patient systems and try and flow the information through into Teams. However, it isn't there yet. We're not completely tied into the FHIR standard for the interoperability. However, there's a lot of other data that's pseudonymized, so it doesn't actually individually reference the patients, which we can use, and that is really interesting. We're working with the Cancer Alliance, and they're looking at their waiting times, and being able to show it across a region and by different hospital really gives them an insight. They can make informed decisions.
Colin, bring you into the conversation within the context of, we've heard from Chris how they leveraged Quest to help them on the back end to get to a better place, to focus on other things. Can you walk us through when you first got that call? You may not have been that individual, but when Quest got brought in, and now how you support them on a moving forward basis?
Yeah, sure. So it's an atypical situation where quite often the decision to select the vendor to help is made with the back against the wall. As Chris has already said, who's running short of resources. You've got timelines to reach, and there's a whole load of associated risks if you don't, and none so more than healthcare, right? Because if you get that wrong, if you start losing data, you could even put people's lives at risk. So we met up, chatted about the deadlines, the requirements, learned about the environment, and really get to know what Chris's imperatives, or what did he really need, where there were shortcomings, what did he actually want to do? Because quite often there's a lot of unconsidered requirements. So a process is maybe mapped out in someone's head, but there's a lot of other things to consider around that too, so no other risks are involved. So we go through with Chris and the team, understand what's going on, and then really start mapping out how can we use our technologies. And that usually means a little bit of knowledge transfer to start with, although Chris case, he kind of knows us anyway, so that was great. And then we look at the deployment and really making sure we try and get the resources in the right place for him. And as Chris understands, support is everything. So we also, of course, have, as you know, follow the sun support. And our support guys don't just sit in a closet or a room isolated. They actually get out and do some of this stuff as well, and work tightly with the people delivering us. And that's really where we're ongoing. Once you've deployed these things and even maybe completed the project, there's so much more that is ongoing. No organization stands still, and the NHS are one of those that are always evolving, as Chris has alluded to.
I know that with the healthcare systems, and certainly the people and the processes behind them, who they're really working with on behalf of patients is not just management or security of data, but also the privacy nature of that. And this might not be the specific PII type of data, but just the elements of you putting trust in a service like Microsoft 365, the notion of how you get content in and who has access to it. And then there's a lot of just how your people work, orchestrating across what I would assume are fairly considerable workflows, whether they're manual or hardened through an actual flow. When you think about using something like Microsoft Teams with the backbone of a content service like SharePoint, were there ever any concerns with the compliance measures or any of the governance of information, who is involved and how things are orchestrated? Or was that something that was already proven in the marketplace or was proven as a part of this project?
We were very early adopters of Teams, so we saw it grow and the extra services being added in. And for us, it gives us that single pane of glass. It glues all the information together. We started off with SharePoint Online. We did all the governance, making sure we're in the right position and what information could be shared where. And then we started adding the extra features. And then Teams came along and it blew our mind. And the extra stuff that's coming in, we keep adding additional things. And we are so pleased that Microsoft has invested all the time and effort in the sort of security scores, the advice, the improvements. We're able to manage it ourselves and work with partners to just make that sort of step change to ensure we're secure all the time. And that's something that's so exciting about Microsoft and the partners, because they're going, look, have you thought about this? Because I can only see in one direction. And being honest, I can only absorb so much information. Whereas reaching out to these larger networks, they can say, have you seen this? What about this? Have you thought about this? And it gives me so many more options.
Yeah, but it goes beyond that stack as well. We're talking about the services being used, but I often get asked the question, well, hang on, aren't I better just securing my own data center? Because I'm in full control. I know who's being hired. I can manage all of everything that's running. Why am I going to a service that's hosted elsewhere? It seems like a risk, and especially the data privacy guys go, hey, this is a risk, and this is why one of my specializations, it actually reduces the risk. You cannot invest to the level that Microsoft does in protecting the environment that these services are running in. You cannot do that. And so moving to the Microsoft stack, and let's face it, of all the other providers out there, Microsoft's got one of the best reputations for securing that data. And then they're also, as you've said, Chris, really looking at making sure the tools are available to be able to maintain that management whilst granularly offering that data out to the right people.
And I appreciate hearing you say that. I remember a couple of years ago having a discussion with someone in the pharmaceutical industry about the kinds of things that we do on the back end when files are stored, how they're broken apart, and they're separately at rest, they're separately encrypted, then the keys are encrypted, and there's a rotating set of key repositories, and every key gets flipped every 24 hours. There was an IT engineer who said, oh, we can do that in my company. And I was like, I would love to see your budget then. There are economies of scale that Microsoft has, and frankly, that Google and Salesforce and Amazon and other providers in this space have. It's the reason why you hire an army and not a security guard. So one of the things that we like to do on the Intrazone Partner Edition is ask a set of standard questions, offbeat questions.
So our first question is going to go to you, Colin, because in the nature of working with not just one customer, but a lot of them, strategizing across the day, how do you manage your tasks? If you assign yourself a task or you get assigned a task, how do you best manage your tasks on a daily basis?
You see, the trouble is I'm old school. So I actually find the best way of organizing myself is the inbox of my Outlook client, and then a folder structure below for everything that I have actioned. I'm afraid it's just the one that seems to work throughout, and the calendar. I would love to go beyond that. I mean, one of the best things moving from Skype for Business to Teams was persistent chat and the easy way to find all of that information. And in fact, Teams has grown so much that you were talking about the aquarium at Quest, and we actually have a Teams group called Life Aquatic, which is all of us scuba divers sharing this information and about where we've been and all the photos and the various pictures. So it's now it used to be solely Outlook, but now, oh gosh, we're finding, hey, Teams, this is great. And of course, the back end of that is SharePoint and OneDrive.
So I'm going to pivot off of the Life Aquatic with the cinematic reference there and turn to another offbeat question. So recently, Parasite at the United States Academy Awards won the Oscar for Best Picture. If SharePoint were to win an Academy Award, which category would it win?
Yeah, I think the most misunderstood technology award, because I think people don't really see it in its entirety. Everyone has a view based on how they've come to use SharePoint, ended up with it. And that's being more complicated with Teams, but because often they don't even know they're using SharePoint. I think the biggest challenge is the fact that people don't really understand everything it can offer as SharePoint. And We're seeing organizations like Marks and Spencer's and others that are really starting to take control and build it into the core of how their business operates.
Very nice. Well, we will send the award to you. We'll have to put extra stamps and postage because it's quite heavy. This is a quick one for Colin. This might be a slightly competitive question, but why does a toad often pop up in the Quest Twitter feed?
Right. So this is one of our other big problems. We acquire a lot of companies over the years, pre-Dell, post-Dell. We've always, it's been a great way, and hell, that's the way I got there. But at the same time, we acquire some brands, and sometimes also we create products and brands. And so Toad happens to be one of our most used but least connected to Quest solutions out there. In fact, it goes way beyond what people actually think it does. It's another one. It's our SharePoint, in effect.
Excellent. Well, we will put a link in the show notes to the blog.toadworld.com, and people can discover for themselves.
And let's wrap the questions with one more for Chris. What is Microsoft 365?
Okay, you've got me there. I've actually got an answer for this one. I talk about 365 as being a Swiss Army knife. It's got loads of tools, and it's working out which one you need to use first. And then once you've got used to using one, you then need to add the next one in.
Fantastic. So we're just about done. Chris, where can people go for more information about NHS, Arden, and Gem?
But so we're active on Twitter, but come and visit us at ardengemcsu.nhs.uk or reach out to me personally through LinkedIn.
Excellent. And for Quest, where can we go to find more information, follow what Quest is doing these days?
The easiest way, of course, is quest.com. And if you want to know particularly about our SharePoint, then /Metalogics. But that's got everything for it. And also, if you want to follow what we're doing and also my thoughts, then you can also find me on LinkedIn.
We will make sure all those links and more are in the show notes. Let's run through our frequently asked questions. This is where we just want to hear you tease up your most frequently asked question and, of course, provide the answer. And we will start with Chris, not McNulty, first.
Okay, so one of the questions I'm getting a lot of is what is Teams? And I know it sounds ridiculous, but it's trying to explain to people how it's going to make their life better. And the answer we take them through going, well, where do you put your information? How do you have persistent chat? Where do you find out what's going on? And then we show them how we use it. And we're very much into eating our own dog food. So we go, look, here's my devices, here's how I connect. And it blows them over. And I'll tell you what, 2 days ago, I was sat there with someone who was going, there's no need for this, there's no need for it. And he was actually become a complete proponent to it, to one of his colleagues, and saying, this Teams is great. And that is when you know you win.
And other Chris McNulty, what's your most frequently asked question?
One I've gotten 4 times this week already is about, my other job outside of the Intrazone is Project Cortex, our new way of building your knowledge networks across Microsoft 365. And since Cortex includes graph connectors to let you start bringing data from outside into the graph to get benefits of it, do you still need migration? And the answer to that is an emphatic yes. Just because you can start getting benefits from information that may still live in a file share or in Documentum or someplace doesn't mean that that's necessarily the best place for the content. The best experience that we can give you with the ability to do things like co-authoring and encryption and version control, all of that comes by bringing the information onto the platform. And that's really why we see migration as being something that's going to be amplified by what we're doing with Project Cortex. So let me turn that back to you, Colin, and see what's a frequently asked question that you've been getting lately.
Most of the time it's why are you here? But to be honest, I because of what I do, I have such a broad range of people that I engage with. Well, actually, the most frequent one is, how does Brexit affect me with GDPR and where's my data stored? That seems to be a big one. And I know that seems a little odd, and why I was actually going to call out the Project Cortex as one of the best announcements in Ignite, because as I said, I'm very much into data privacy, and it's all about knowing where that data is. And so it's, how should I organize my data? How do I control that data? And what's data sovereignty? Those are the sort of things that I get asked the most.
Well, it sounds like you could build a great 60-minute presentation, and maybe we will see that online or at Ignite sometime in the future.
So, Mark, what's your frequently asked question?
So I asked the question about tasks, and I often find myself, because I really like and have been adopting Microsoft To Do, I'm not trying to oversell it, but I just use it a lot as an individual. And so I end up giving a lot of demos either at a team meeting, or it just so happened that I took part in an online Twitter jam, which is by the Collab Talk people. And so I just oftentimes show Microsoft To Do, and a lot of people ask, well, does it actually show you a view of all of your tasks? And what they mean is not just ones that you put in there, but things that are assigned to you from Planner, things that you flag from Outlook, and of course the things that you put there as an individual. And the answer is yes, it's a great task aggregation tool. And I pivot and show them, where things come from and how they show up. And of course, then I get the one question that is, can I flag things in OneNote? And that's just one area where it doesn't yet aggregate from OneNote. But certainly, there's a lot of great task aggregation. And my answer these days is, yes, Microsoft To Do can do that.
Well, Mark, thanks for sharing that. And thanks to our guests for sharing their frequently asked questions. And if you have a question you'd like to see us cover in a future edition of the IntraZone, please reach out to us through the show notes, and we'll be happy to feature it in a future broadcast.
Yeah, let's talk real briefly just about events, and then we'll wrap it up here. Colin, you have a large event that Quest puts on, the Experts Conference, in November 17th through the 18th in Atlanta. A little bit that you can tell us about that. Certainly we'll have a link in the show notes and encourage people to attend.
Absolutely. I was so pleased to be able to attend when we restarted this event last year and even be able to speak at it. It's an event for the technical people, the people that are actually doing it. And it's such a close community as well that you get to speak directly with the people speaking. And we've got some real experts externally and internally. It's not just about listening to people go on about some fantastic ideas. It's about connecting to your peers. So the feedback was amazing from last year. And so we're so excited to be able to do this much bigger this year.
I do think the conference should consider renaming, because you've done it again. You've invited me to keynote at Tech one more time. So it should be the Experts and Chris Conference.
So many Chris's, so many experts. So we also like to talk about SharePoint Saturdays really quickly. These are great free events, typically on Saturdays. And in March, there is a SharePoint Saturday in Redmond, March 7th. There's one in Sacramento, March 21st. There's one in Omaha, also on March 21st. And one in Vancouver up north from us, March 28th. We want to take a second here to thank you, both Colin and Chris, for coming on the show. Any last thoughts as we head out here that you want to share with our audience and out to the world?
For me, the big thing is see what you can do next. You've invested in technology, find the next tool. What else are you going to put out there?
Excellent.
And for me, don't leave it to the last minute. Come and talk to us. We can probably help you way in advance, even if it's just advice, because we've been doing it for over 30 years. So please don't see us as a bunch of tools. We're actually got a lot of experience in the market as well.
Well, Chris, Colin, thanks for joining us on the IntraZone.
Brilliant. Thanks very much.
Thank you to our guests from Quest and from NHS Arden Gem Commissioning Support Unit.
Mark, I just wanted to say it was really great to hear more about the national health, because I didn't understand how dynamic that structure is. In many ways, like a venture capital firm, with how much merger and acquisition and restructuring and reorganization. It was really insightful there. You may want to learn more. I certainly want to learn more. And one place to go is our show page for links of everything we talked about today and more. You can go to aka.ms/the IntraZone. And if you're interested in listening to other podcasts from Microsoft, visit aka.ms/Microsoft/podcasts.
You can always send us your questions or feedback. This is either for the SharePoint engineering team or for Chris and I to pass along to them. You can email us at theintrazone@microsoft.com, or you can always access us through Twitter @SharePoint, @mcashman, and @cmcnulty2000.
Tell all your friends and colleagues about the show, and definitely share that SharePoint love. Subscribe at your local Olympics venue or wherever you get your podcasts.
Thank you for listening today, no matter which side of the pond, US, UK, or beyond that you are on. We are your hosts, Mark Cashman and Chris McNulty. You've been listening to The Intrazone, a show about the Microsoft 365 partner-powered intelligent intranet.